Right then, let's take a look at the concept of, well, I call it connectivity. Connectivity. See, the thing is, you've got a computer in front of you, and you've probably got lots of different devices connected to it. And they're probably connected using a USB. USB stands for, I won't write it out, it's called Universal Serial Bus. And what happened was, if you take it back into the sort of 1990s, you begin to have lots of mouse and keyboards, and they'll all be connected in different ways to computer, all the different leads. And the people, predominantly led by IBM and Microsoft, they decided that we must create a standard connection. In other words, the universal. So what happened was that a lot of computing companies got together and they decided to develop a standard way of connecting different devices, and they came up with the USB. And you can see here we've actually got the larger one, which is a standard universal standard USB, and then we've got at the other end here. Perhaps we'll just pop this up in this. Let's just do ink color. We'll go to red, I think, on this one. That red. So this one, we can see the larger of the USB. That's probably one that you're used to. And if you have something like a I don't know, like a camera, you normally have these sort of mini USB connections as well. But if you have a mouse, for example, it's just a standard universal serial bus connect all the way through to it, and the mouse is on the end. Same for a keyboard, and same for your scanner and other devices. Cameras, of course, not a good idea to have great big sockets on them, so they tend to have a little mini USB at one end, which connects to the standard USB at the other end. As I said, just go back to a white pen for a moment. This was developed predominantly by Microsoft and IBM and the big sort of PC-based people. And what actually happened, this is a slightly different device here. It looks kind of similar, doesn't it? It looks a bit like a, well, I should go stay with a red pen, really, shouldn't I? But this one here, no, let's go back with that red pen. This one on the end here looks a bit similar to this one up here, and this one here looks a bit similar to this one here, and the principles were the same. This is known as a firewire, and ironically, this one is always seems to be the rivalry, doesn't there? This was developed predominantly by Apple, and I think in the battle between which is the standard connector now, I think we can probably say that the USB has won. But the firewire is still used quite often with camcorders. What basically happened, I'll get a little bit of a history lesson here, was that in this sort of, I suppose, late 90s, perhaps early 2000s, USB 2.0 came up, and then its big rival at the time was Firewire, and the technical thing was IEEE 1394. And the reality was that IEEE 1394 was a bit faster. It was a bit faster than USB 2. So when you had things like, and we had the advent of cameras, camcorders that were getting really good high quality pictures, you tended to find that the firewire was a quicker way of getting your material off your cameras. So that sort of won the battle. But for most things like mice and keyboards, it wasn't really needed, and the USB won the battle there. And now we have USB 3.0 coming up, which is faster than this version of Firewire, and there's new Firewires that are in development as well. But the bottom line is this: they're both just cables to connect devices to your computer, and you have to be aware of both of them. You don't need to go into the depth there. All I would suggest is that USB is pretty much everything nowadays, and camcorders, some camcorders will still use a Firewire connection. So that's cables. But cabling isn't the only way that you connect either computers together or even peripherals to computers. Now, for example, here, I'm sure you are aware of a Wi-Fi zone. So we're going to talk about that little chat for a moment. Wireless connectivity. There we go. So how do you connect to wireless connectivity? Well, basically, let's imagine now you've got a laptop here. Terrible drawing again, but you've got your laptop and there's the keyboard there. Lots of lovely keys. And you want to connect your laptop to your school's network. So ultimately, your documents are stored. Oh, that's terrible handwriting. Your documents are stored on a, I don't even scribble through that again, a file server. And normally the file server out through to your switch and then through to your computer that you sit in your classroom. But of course you want to connect your laptop and get your My Documents, because your documents are stored on the file server just about here. So of course what you can do is you can have a wireless router, and what that enables, as long as this thing has a wireless card in it, any sort of device, then it can connect wirelessly, there we go, to the network, and you can access your My Documents. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I'm fairly confident that you guys are used to the concept of wireless connectivity when it comes to using your tablets and your laptops at home, or sort of anywhere where there are wireless hotspots, anywhere on the planet, because it's the same everywhere. There's no difference. I won't bore you with channels, it's slightly different. I think we in Europe have 13 channels, and the Japs, that's a little racist, Japanese have 14 channels, Americans have 11. Something like that. That's not going to be on the exam. You just need to explain that as long as the wireless access point, I've got a router, I said router, wireless access point is probably better, and as long as you've got a device with a wireless card in it, you can communicate. We'll come on to how you communicate a little bit later. But wireless and Wi-Fi isn't the only way in which two devices can communicate. We have this symbol here, which is Bluetooth. And Bluetooth is predominantly used for very short-range wireless connections. And I guess the short range is purely because the most common way that you'll see Bluetooth being used is especially the side of someone's head. I don't know, this is supposed to be the ear, and that's supposed to be the hair. Oh, that's not too bad. Eyes and nose. And what you'll see is people wearing these headsets, don't they? Taxi drivers in particular wear those, and they have their phone in their pocket. And you can have a little Bluetooth connection between the headset and the actual phone itself. And one of the things that you guys might do is that you might want to take two mobile devices, and you can swap photos, and yeah, I think you can even swap like songs and stuff like that, can't you, by bumping two Bluetooth devices together. And they say it's very much short range, and it tends to be what we would call low bandwidth for, you know, just little bits of data that you want to swap around. I know businessmen will often use Bluetooth to swap their contact details and things like that. But the most common use of Bluetooth at this moment in time, well, actually the most common use of Bluetooth at this moment in time is probably going to be on wireless controllers on PlayStations and Xboxes. They use Bluetooth, to be honest with you, and Wii's as well, they do as well. But I suppose the one that we're all familiar with is the man or woman with a little headset plugged in with a phone in their pocket for a Bluetooth device. So that's your two most well-known sort of wireless connections. There, of course, is a third, and it's a bit more old school in some ways, in that there's also the ability to do infrared connections. Perhaps the most common use we'll think of is remote control. And you think, but this is IT exam, infrared is nothing to do with remote controls. Well, in fact, actually, I think you'll find that the Wii uses infrared as well, doesn't it? But also, if you go back before the iPads and tablets came along, a lot of people had what they call PDAs. And a PDA was a personal digital assistant, and you could buy a keyboard, and it would connect to the PDA using an infrared connection. Now, don't know why I said it twice. It's so important. But also, infrareds are used. Remote controls are not just for televisions. I mean, I have a camcorder that has an infrared remote control with it as well. So lots of different devices. Infrared, perhaps not the major one that we'd think of when connecting devices wirelessly, and not really when we want to connect two computers. If you want to connect two computers, and don't forget your smartphone or whatever it is with a Bluetooth, and it is a computer in its own right, you're really going to be using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. But just be aware of infrared because it is on the specification. So let's talk Wi-Fi again. Now, you probably recognize this. This is a modem router. And it's a modem router, and it's the sort of thing that you have at home to enable you to connect your laptop out to your internet connection. And I want to just introduce a couple of bits of terminology first of all, because they are on the specification, and I don't want you to get thrown if an exam question says, what do we mean by SSID? Well, SSID, I think I always say to people, the key way to remember is ID. When we think of ID, we think of identification. And you know, if you switch your phone on or you switch on your laptop, and it says available wireless points, available wireless networks, and you might get a list, and it might say like BT open zone, and then it might say BT, and it might have some numbers 1715634, and then you might have something that says Belkin 54G, and you're for a big built-up area, and then you see Dave's network. And you're thinking, that's unusual, these are all, and then Dave's network. Well, because, it probably was something like a BT something, but Dave obviously went into the settings of router, and he changed the name of the SSID. So he changed it. It was probably originally BT 1736 FJKP. Bit meaningless, isn't it? So he changed to Dave's network, and therefore he set the SSID. The SSID is nothing more than the name of the wireless network, That's all it is. So don't get confused. Just ID. Think of it that way. So when you come up with a list, and you get your phone, and you bring it up, and you go, oh, look at these available networks. Those are the SSIDs. But of course, once you've found a network, you'll notice that most of them, you have this list now, I'll put it over here, and they'll all have perhaps little padlock symbols next to them, because they are in fact secure. And if you were to double click on one, it will ask you to enter normally the WEP or the WPA key, and that's where you would normally have to give in or provide, sort of type in manually the key, which is just the ability to let you actually, the network is secure. I'm explaining this so badly. It's such a simple thing, really. You'll know what it is. You've got to type in the password. That's the word I'm looking for. The key is nothing more than really a password that enables you to access that particular network. Okay, so that's really what we're looking at. Hopefully that makes sense to you all. One final thing that I want to introduce you to is the expression firewall. You've probably heard it, and they probably talk about it in school, and you're probably maybe a little unsure about what it actually means. Well, let's imagine now you're sat at a school computer. There you go. I should really have got some graphics for this. And you're sat at your school computer, and that goes out to the switch that's probably up on the wall in your school somewhere, and that will eventually go on to another switch, but we won't bore with that. But eventually we're going to get to what we call something called the proxy server, an expression you may have heard of before, and that ultimately would give your school's connection out to the internet. But the thing is, if we put a switch here, I'm going to put in here, I'll put file server on there. Now this has lots of important data. Okay, it's got all your my work, hasn't it? And you're probably thinking, what you don't want is you don't want hackers getting to your, some spotty kid in a bedroom in Nuremberg or something. I don't know why I'm picking on the Germans in particular, but anyway, the whole point is that if you're connected to the internet, then someone sitting anywhere with a laptop, in theory, has the ability to access this file server. There is a connection there. Okay, so what we'll say this is this hacker. There we go. Whoop, hacker. And a hacker has the ability to get into the network. Now, if it's a school, it doesn't really matter too much, because they'll back things up. But what you don't want is people getting into very important networks like banks and MI5 and people like that. So on the proxy server, what you have is your firewall. And the way that I get people to understand this is that imagine that a firewall is nothing more than a bouncer on a nightclub front door. See, the reality is that what a bouncer is doing is sitting here and it's monitoring all the traffic that is coming from the net and going in there. So let's say you're sat at this computer, and I'm not going to go, yeah, all right, let's do this. Your computer, when it's connected, is given an IP address. And let's just, for the moment, I'm not going to go technical with IP addresses, but we'll just say it's called 1.2.3.4. So when you type in www.google.com, because you can do your search. You send a little packet of data out, and it's a little packet, like a little letter if you like, and it says, I want to go to google.com, and I've come from IP address 1234. And it goes all the way through, and it goes here, and it goes to the firewall, and the firewall is the bounce on the door, and it recognises who's leaving the building. And out you go to the internet, and you go off to Google. There you go, there's Google. And Google sends back, and it stamps the packet, it stamps it saying, this is for computer 1234, and it has come from Google. So the bouncer says, hold on a minute, I just saw you leave the building, you went off to Google, and you've come back from Google, you're addressed to 1234, I recognise you, you are on the list. Your name's on the list, son, you can come back in. So that's what the firewall does. But let's say now the hacker, he's sitting at a computer, and his computer, if connected to the internet, also gets an IP address, and we'll call this one 6.7.8.9. So he, basically, the hacker, tries to get in through the firewall. And you can see what's happening here now. He turns up in his little packet of data, stamped with 6.7.8.9, and the firewall bouncer says, your name's not on the list, son. You're not coming in. And that is essentially what a firewall does. All it does is it monitors traffic coming in and out of the network. And if it recognizes the address of that it comes from inside its own network, then it will let it back in. And if it doesn't recognize the address inside the network, it will say, no, you cannot have entry inside this network. There we go. Hopefully that's all made sense to you. Different forms of connectivity, and we finished off there with what a firewall does.